Hello everyone. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at the autopilot options of the G1000nx. Now the autopilot is pretty much the same as you're probably familiar with the existing G1000. We have a couple little quirks to it that we're going to kind of take a look at today, so we'll go ahead and get started right away. So autopilots are divided into two basic systems. Your first system is going to be dedicated to what I would call your roll program, which is going to be your left and right. And you also have your pitch program, which is going to be up and down. Some autopilots have what they call an extra axis, which is going to be your third axis, aka your speed. We do not have that option in this aircraft, so unfortunately we're kind of limited by that. So to get the autopilot started, now the first thing worth noting is to look at this little upper bar here and determine exactly which modes are pre-armed. Right now, if I were to pick a mode, for example, I pick the heading mode, you're going to notice that the automatic pilot does not kick in. The two modes are armed, meaning they're not white, so they're green in this case, which means they're working immediately. But you'll also notice there's no AP light to tell me the automatic pilot is actually turned on. So if I were to actually shut this off, you'll notice it switches to the word roll. If I press it again, it's going to select heading. So think of this as the pre-armed mode here. Now if I press FD, notice it immediately cancels all the different modes out that I have here. Now if I reached over here and just press the AP button, you'll notice it defaults automatically to roll, which says, hey, hold the wings level. And pit, meaning, hey, hold this thing at this continuous pitch here, right? And also we have this nice green text to say, hey, the automatic pilot is on. You'll also notice this little pink thing here appeared to let me know that the airplane's trying to hold this angle right here. Now you can fly this airplane 100% like this if you needed to. As a matter of fact, you have this nose up and nose down button over here. You could actually go ahead and press nose up and you can actually get the plane to go ahead and stick itself up to 7.5 degrees, which as everybody knows is the magical angle in order to get maximum climb. Well, I guess everybody knows that. But you also can see we can almost fly the airplane this way. Now one of the neat things is, if I try to pitch this aircraft, I'll pitch it to the left. Notice the automatic pilot grabbed the yoke out of my hand and actually snapped it to go ahead and point it back in the correct direction. So this is, while it's a useful mode for kind of keeping you steady, there's a lot of other functionality that we're going to want to be taking a look at. The first functionality we're going to take a look at is going to be what they call altitude hold, and that's going to be holding an altitude. If I press the altitude button at any time, you're going to notice that the word altitude appears in green. You're also going to notice that we've got this little green text here that tells us the altitude that it has captured. Keep in mind, if we don't want to travel at this altitude, we weren't supposed to press the altitude button at that time. Notice if I press Alt again, it automatically reverts back to pit or pitch mode. So it's going to hold whatever pitch it was just at a moment ago. So if I were to actually mangle altitude again, notice it locks us to 3,050 feet here because that is the new captured altitude. If we want to customize what altitude we want to travel at, we can use this knob down here and simply select the one we want. So for example, let's say we want to go up to 3,500 feet here. To get up to there, of course, there's a couple different things we could do. If we're in pit mode, we go ahead to Alt. We can select pit, and we can actually hit nose up a bunch of times, and we can actually get this aircraft to go cruising up there directly. Now, what I want to show you is, you see how this new word appeared? This is ALTS. That means altitude is armed, but it has not been captured yet. So what I'll do real quickly is I'll speed up time a teeny bit. Get a little bit closer to that altitude. Notice this thing is flashing to give us an altitude warning, and watch what happens when we cross our 3,500 feet. Did you see how this text immediately turned green, and now we have altitude captured, and it's flashing to let us know that you have captured that specific altitude. Now the nice thing about that is you can really sit here and just kind of tweak the pitch all you want in order to get it to where you want to go. This works in reverse too if it's something that you're trying to achieve. Now let's get a little bit more complicated. Let's say we want to control the altitude, but we want to do it at a specific speed. That's actually really easy to do. We simply select the altitude we wish to achieve. Let's say we want to go up to 4,000 feet here real quickly. We come over here and we press the FLC button. FLC will automatically capture the current speed and use that as the climb speed. So I'm going to press flick. It's going to go ahead and do nothing. No, the reason it does nothing is because there's only no excessive power, so we're going to get no climb rate here. So if I were to take my throttle and push it all the way forward, notice the aircraft immediately pitches forward so that it continually maintains the 115 knots as it makes its way up to 4,000 feet. Now notice again, ALTS has been captured, and notice 115 is my speed that has been selected. If I want to change the speed that I'm selected, I can just come here and use nose up and nose down to go ahead and play with this. Now for example, if I wanted to climb at, let's say our VY here, which is a 75 knots. Oh, we already got to it. That's not going to work so well for us because we don't have a lot of room. So by the time we get to the altitude, we've already got to the altitude. So in this case, that's not really going to do us a lot of good as far as those things goes. So now that you've seen that, we'll take a look at another way to control our altitude. Let's say we want to descend back down to 3,000 feet. I simply arm the altitude I want to travel down to, and now what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to select a new mode called VS. VS lets us decide how many feet per second, or feet per minute, if you like another way to look at it, we want to descend. So I'm going to press VS, Now we simply use nose up and nose down again. In this case, 500 feet per minute is a very comfortable descent rate. Keep in mind, since our throttle is not under control of the computer, if we push the throttle forward here, it's not going to increase our vertical speed, it's going to increase our actual speed. So keep in mind, you don't want to go scooting into the yellow trying to practice some of these maneuvers. Now, as a general rule of thumb, 500 feet per minute is about the limit you want to be making your way down. Otherwise, the ears are going to start at the poppage, and you're going to be tremendously uncomfortable on your way down here. So, of course, if we want to speed that process up, I could go down to 1,000 feet per minute. And again, you can get pretty absurd. Keep in mind, at any time, you can press the Alt button to cancel your descent here. Now, let's say, you got a sudden call from air traffic control, and they requested, hold current altitude. I just pressed the Alt button, and notice it recaptured that altitude I was at. However, and this is one of the great things about the G1000nx, it remembered the altitude we wanted to descend to. Now, if I'm like, oh, okay, we're good. So now I'm going to press the vertical speed. It goes down, 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 down. Now notice, we'll continue descending to my new targeted altitude. And again, that is so wonderful. You have no idea how nice this is of an autopilot compared to some of the things that we've experienced in the past. So that's it as far as altitude controls. We're now going to take a look at the roll controls. Roll is what's going to dictate the direction the aircraft is traveling. We basically have three modes. We have roll, which is going to give you the ability to keep the wings level, which I'm not going to lie, I use it a lot in the real plane. We have we have heading, which holds a specific heading. The way we can do that is super simple. This is the heading that we have selected. If we want to change it, we can hold our mouse over here. As a quick shortcut, if you push in with your finger, it will automatically snap to your current heading. So if I wanted to go, let's say a 120 real quickly, I simply select my heading with the heading bug, press the HDG button, and the aircraft is immediately going to turn. It is worth noting that heading hold is not track hold. So because we actually have a wind coming out of that direction right now, this aircraft is not traveling in that track. It's traveling in that heading. The aircraft is actually going like this, even though we're pointing this way. That's an interesting problem. Now, if this were magenta, you would actually have the ability to go ahead and correct for that, which we don't. Notice, by the way, the other autopilot kept going, even though we were fixing with the heading. If you take a look really closely, does everybody see this little teeny tiny diamond? That will actually tell you where the aircraft is tracking. So if we actually wanted to use a 120 track, what we'd actually have to do is we'd have to take the plane to the right to get this diamond over 120. Again, this is, they call it the wind diamond, if you want to kind of think about it another way. And that will give us a safer track. Yeah, there's about 122. So now we know our wind correction angle too, which is awesome. The other type of method we have is we actually have what they call a navigation hold. Now, the navigation hold is a little tricky because you have to make sure you dial in whatever your navigation source is before you try to make it hold. So in this case, our current navigation source is going to be GPS. How do I know? It says it right there. Now, if I switch this to VOR, for example, in which case that's an ILS, I can change the mode that we're getting our navigation data from. In this case, I want to use the GPS. So to activate this, I'm going to reach over, I'm going to press the nav button. Notice, GPS turned white. It did not turn green. The reason it did that is the GPS was not close enough to the actual GPS course line here to actually capture it and start following it directly. Now, there's a couple ways we can solve that. The simplest way that I always like to solve is I always like to take the heading autopilot and I like to kind of point it a little bit closer, or I even do like an oblique to it to give me a little bit more control over exactly where this aircraft is going to go. Now notice I got close and that little green light started flashing, telling us that GPS hold is now in effect, which means this aircraft is not only being held up and down, but it is also being held as a GPS, which gives us the ability to go ahead and set ourselves up for a direct landing. Speaking of a landing, we've now gotten ourselves close enough to actually go ahead and land the plane. Now, the cool thing here is we can actually tell the automatic pilot to land the plane for us. In this case, what we're going to do is we're just going to reach over and press the APR button. And when we press APR, you're going to get two new things. You're going to get a thing that's going to say lock and another one that's going to say out. Now, you'll notice that because we are so high for this particular waypoint, I'm actually going to take manual control of the aircraft, and we're just going to make our way down. Now, notice the flight director is still doing its job here. So it actually just gave me a heads up saying, hey, by the way, even though you're a little on the high side, you need to go ahead and start taking yourself a little bit of a left turn to start making your way down onto the ground here. Another thing that's really cool about this system is that it actually went ahead and captured the correct frequency that I needed to use for the purposes of our landing. Now, you'll notice as soon as I went and hit that flip button that the localizer is now the new selected navigational source. The reason it chose to do that is because the localizer is what we need to actually follow to get ourselves down safely to the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fly this plane just a little bit here, get ourselves all nice and lined up, make sure that localizer is set correctly, which it's perfectly where it needs to be. You can also see over on the right-hand side that our MFD is showing our current level information, and you can see we're just slightly off course here, which isn't too bad at all. Give myself a couple whaps of trim here. I'm going to go ahead and now flip on the automatic pilot, just like that. And I'm now going to let the aircraft land the plane. Now, the cool thing is you'll notice lock is now green, which means we have captured the localizer, which is going to be our left and right information for our landing approach. The next one we're looking for is going to be the glide slope. As we're currently established, we're significantly below the glide slope we need to be at. So I'm actually going to give it a couple whacks of trim real fast so we can go ahead and accelerate time so you can see exactly what this is going to look like. Now notice, the glide slope light just started flashing and we hit this point right here. The aircraft is now completely under the control of the autopilot for the purposes of landing. We're only responsible for things like, putting flaps down and stuff like that. Speaking of which, we got 110. We can go ahead and pop that first notch down right away. Go ahead and give ourselves a little bit of power. I'm going to go ahead and speed up time to kind of make our approach a little bit briefer so you can kind of see everything in action. We want to get ourselves down to our appropriate speed. There's our best glide. Pop down the next notch, a couple notches of flaps. Go ahead and give ourselves a little bit more throttle. It's kind of fun to sped up time because you can see exactly how much effect flaps have. And right there, look at that. So now the aircraft is completely landing itself. At any time, of course, we could go ahead and suspend and go ahead and approach it. Speaking of suspend, let me go ahead and slow down time again. The suspend button is this weird thing right here. What this does is it tells the automatic pilot, or it tells the GPS, don't go to the next waypoint until I'm done what I'm doing right now. So if I press it right now, nothing bad is going to happen. All we're doing is saying, hey, don't change my waypoint. I might need to come back around to that waypoint, which means our runway 24 waypoint is going to be our waypoint that we want. Now, the reason this is so useful is if you're on an approach and you have to do a missed approach, you can shut that off real quickly, and when you overfly the runway, it'll automatically grab onto your missed approach position, which is super cool. If I actually shut off suspend, you'll actually be able to see all those different waypoints as they start to appear during this particular approach here. And again, that's just kind of a neat little quirk. So let's go ahead and increase my time here. I'm going to go ahead and finish up our little approach here, and then we'll go ahead and call it on this video. Getting a little close to the ground. Let's see, we're going pretty fast here. We're going pretty fast. All right, now that's definitely more than minimum. So I'm going to go ahead and kill the automatic pilot, and we'll go ahead and put this thing down on the ground. So as you can see, the automatic pilot on this thing is very robust, given the fact that we're just a tiny little 172 and we have the capabilities of, I swear, some airliners or something like that. That's pretty darn impressive. At the end of the day, even though the automatic pilot is a very, very powerful tool and it gives us some amazing control over our flight, don't forget that you're still the pilot and you're still responsible for getting your folks down on the ground safely. So you want to make sure you always keep those things in mind, always monitor, always give yourself idiot checks, because before you know it, you're going to accidentally crash into some cumulus granite there as you're cruising through a cloud. But other than that, enjoy.